Broadcasting from the studios of WKEN, where every day it's the weekend. It's the Ken Calvert Show with your host, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. It's Ken Calvert, KC, the Casual One, and welcome to the Ken Calvert Show podcast. All right, I'm going to be right up front about this, okay? I've been really, really bad in terms of keeping up with the vision of my podcast, and the heck, the studio is like 15 feet from the kitchen. All I have to do is get the coffee on and walk in here and open the microphone and start to chat and hope that maybe you find something compelling that will come out of it. But we never know. We just don't know. So what the heck? There are so many people podcasting, and I listen to so many of them, and they're good. They're really, really good. But I thought, what the heck? I'll just try and throw my name out there too and see what the heck happens. So I apologize if I just sort of stumble along through this one, because I'm just trying to get my feet back underneath me to get this going again. And I mean, I really probably should start with something like, www, or I could say WABX, the night service, or I could say something like 101 FM, WRIF, the home of rock and roll. Or I could say something like this, WLLZ. What else? Oh, I could say News Talk 760 WJR. Or I could say 94.7 WCSX. Wait, I could say something like, ladies and gentlemen, wearing number 4, Joe Mars. But that would just be too self-fulfilling, don't you think? I agree. So let's move on. I want you to meet WKEN. That's right. That's the studio here, the home studio, WKEN, where every day is the weekend. So August 20th, this past week, it turns out that every day is a National Something Day, right? So August 20th was National Radio Day, and I simply wrote down, I retired from radio in October 2017. I miss it. I miss the parking lot, the building, my peers, the mic, and especially the thrill of my first break. If you're in radio, you certainly know what I mean about that. I miss the listeners the most, and that's the truth. I really, really do miss the listeners, the phones, and I guess in a way you could say that it's an affirmation. I think that people that get into radio feel somehow inadequate in other areas. I don't know about you guys that are in radio or those of you listening right now, but I always felt that like I was never really as cool as everybody else, and I wasn't a gifted athlete, I wasn't a gifted student. I had a deep voice, and I knew what I wanted to do, but I just always felt like being in radio kind of leveled the playing field for me with the rest of the people socially in a room. And I hope that makes sense. Long story short, I got so much feedback from that tweet, and I also put it up on Facebook, and I'm going to go there in just a moment, by the way. About 350 people liked what I said, and I think it was probably the fact that I care the most about the listeners. And I mean, come on, let's face it, that's the key, that's the engine, man. Without that, we got nothing at all. One thing I always loved about country radio when they would go to award shows, and they still do this, they always thank the listeners. The one gripe that I always had with the Grammys and other awards that are going on right now, for some reason rock and roll forgets how important the listeners are. Guys, you built these acts. Your support made them who they are. And it's important for you to remember that. Your passion for us is paramount to what we do. So I want to thank you in advance as I get back into podcasting here. And I know I'm going all over the place, but you give a guy a microphone on a Sunday afternoon, and what the heck? All right, getting to Facebook. I recently got back into Facebook, and I dipped a toe in and just put some things up there. And People responded. I'm a light-hearted guy. I like to think of myself as nobody gets hurt zone. I want you to get up and maybe look at my Facebook post and get a laugh, a chuckle. It's also a great platform for podcasting. But I'm back, and I hope you like it. So you'll see the podcasting episodes coming up on your Facebook page. That's it. Okay, all right. But so getting back to where we were. God knows I'm a curmudgeon now. I need something to do. So I came into the studio and I said, just turn on the mic and have a chat and see what happens. Okay, Kenny boy? Okay. So I wrote down a couple of things just so that I wouldn't stray too far. So we talked about National Radio Day, and it's so cool. I just love listening to the radio to this day. I absolutely love it. Love it, love it, love it. And so many cool people out there in Radio Land that were chiming in about National Radio Day. Same time, it was a powerful rock and roll week. Gene Simmons from Kiss, by the way, turned 69. I have a couple of interviews from Gene and Kiss that I'll run down the road for you. I found this to be the most interesting article last week. I believe it was on Tuesday. While enjoying a wild birthday party, The Who's Keith Moon, in his inebriated state, drove a Lincoln Continental limousine into the swimming pool of a Holiday Inn. The Holiday Inn was in Flint, Michigan. Unfortunately, he released the handbrake and began rolling towards the pool. Well, I remember that. That was really, really a big story. I would have been, I don't know, like my first year in high school. But it was huge. I was such a fan of The Who. So I went back and I thought, did I ever do any interviews with The Who? And I found a great interview with Pete Townshend. And we ended up talking about his appearance at Southfield High School and also at the Grande Ballroom. And I thought, what the heck, instead of hearing me talk about the podcast and me, why not give you guys a little shot of Pete Townshend? So I want to thank you for listening. Down the road, I got some buddies of mine that you all know that are going to join us on the podcast, and I promise you to stay faithful to the show and to talking to you guys. I want to thank you again for any and all support that you've given me for nearly 45 years on radio, and I hope you enjoy the podcast, and that's me applauding you right now. So here we go. This was me with Pete Townshend, and I'm going to set the Wayback Machine to 2006. So Pete, take it from here, and I will talk to you guys hopefully in the next couple of days, all right? Hope you're well. Enjoy your Sunday here. Wherever you are. All right, be well. Okay.
Hello?
Hello, Pete.
Yeah.
How are you?
Hi, is this Ken?
Yes, it is. Nice to have you along, sir. How are you?
I'm good.
It's a great honor to have you on. Congratulations with Endless Wire.
Thank you.
That it just sounds so good, so strong, and just congrats to you and everyone else. Are you happy with it?
Yeah, I am. It's a story about three kids who form a band, and then it went off into a whole load of I suppose what you could call fantasy, but in a sense it's not really fantasy. It's my poetic vision of what has happened and what might happen soon. And I wrote this story, I put it up on the internet, a bunch of people read it, and I was happy with that for a while. But then when I was about halfway through preparing tracks for this record, I suddenly got the idea to listen to a couple of my buddies who'd said that they'd read it and they thought it would make a good rock opera and give it a try. And I knocked out some lyrics, I went into the studio, and I decided to make none of the tracks that I developed longer than they really truly needed to be. I promised myself that if I wanted to be sentimental and slushy, I would be sentimental and slushy. If I wanted to be, simple rock and roll, I would do it. I wouldn't tie myself down in any way at all. And the result is this collection of songs.
If you don't mind me doing the music timeline again, I go back to an event, I think it was 67 at Southfield High School here, just outside of Detroit, Michigan, and you performed with Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes, along with the unrelated segments. Now, somebody said you may actually remember these days here in Detroit in the Grande Ballroom as well.
Oh, of course I do.
Yeah.
I remember them very, very well. My friend Tom Wright, who managed the Grande Ballroom for Russ Gibbs for a couple of years, has just finished his memoirs, and a huge chunk of it is about the Grande. And but of course, the other thing is that the Who's first ever show outside of New York, and we'd only done a package in New York, so our first real rock and roll show was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and on that day there were a whole load of notable people from the Detroit scene around, and we remember it very well. We were on our way to the Monterey Pop Festival. When we came back to Southfields, I remember the date, I remember Ted Nugent, I remember everything about it. It's one of the few shows that I remember. I think if you spoke to Roger, he'd probably remember, what there was in the dressing room. He's got a fantastic recall for that stuff. But I think, in a sense, a lot of what the American audience found in the Who's music was first recognized by people that came from the Detroit area. I'm not quite sure why that was. We had our first radio hit in Detroit.
Is that right?
Yeah, with Happy Jack.
Unbelievable, because the Top 40 was so powerful here, and it was reaching out across the Detroit River because of CKLW, the Canadian station, with 50,000 watts. So they were breaking records, but
wow.
Just an amazing opportunity to talk to you with the limited amount of time I have left, Pete Townshend. What's it like for you to realize now that when you look out at that audience and you become that different person that you said you become on stage, that you're singing and playing for 3 generations?
It's incredible, really, but I just feel very, very lucky. I don't mean to kind of get sentimental about this, but I do feel very lucky. Two of the guys that started with the Who are gone, and so many of my friends are gone, and being in 160s, as I am and Roger is, this is the age when we start to lose friends left, right, and center. So the very fact that we're still alive and kicking and able to perform is great in itself. If we were just doing, a downtown club, or if we'd moved to Nashville and decided to sort of retire and play show, or probably Austin, Texas would be a better place to go to. But, to sit around the fireside with guitars, that would be good enough. But as it happens, we can still make a good living at this. We can still, put on high-class shows and do exciting things. And, hey, tour the world. This is something that it means more to me now than it would have done if it had happened to me when I was 19. I was very blasé when I was young, very disconnected, very dedicated to an artistic idea rather than the reality of who I was and what I'd become and what I'd achieved. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I was a little bit kind of detached, and now I realize what it was, not only what I did, but what we all did, and how lucky I am to be a part of it.
Well, how lucky we are to have you still performing and making just great, great music for us. Endless Wire in stores now. 2 final rap questions for you. Number 1, Bob Dylan is in town, Detroit, tonight. The Rolling Stone article written by Jenny, I think it's Jenny Eluscu. Yeah. Jenny has as sort of a headline, Pete Townshend and why it took 24 years for a new Who album and why he doesn't want to see Dylan or the Stones play again. On your website, you mentioned, I didn't mean that. I didn't really mean to say it like that. Here's your chance to tell Bob Dylan you're coming tonight.
Well, I had a chance to tell him that when he came to see us play, and he was very gracious. Both these guys, both the Stones and the Who, and I think it's true of Crosby, Stills and Nash, who I also name-checked in that piece, these are people that I suppose I exalt so much as artists that I feel it's appropriate to kind of cast them aside in a way, and it's probably not. I shouldn't really talk about them in that kind of familiar way. I think that older artists of our generation are having a problem now. We are getting so old. And age became people like Ella Fitzgerald, I think, until she started to have trouble hearing and seeing. Age became people like Frank Sinatra until his toupee started to fall off at gigs and he couldn't hit those high notes. What's happening to us is that I don't know that age is becoming us either. The music stays forever young somehow because the music is kept young by the audience, not by the performer. I think that's all I was trying to say, that if I was a young person and inside the music of the Stones and Dylan will always be for me those first few records and those first few events that I saw when I was 19, 20, and 21. It's not that I want to hold on to that, but I just don't think they can ever do it for me again. They just can't do it for me again. That was too precious an experience. And I think you have to accept this. If you're a 25-year-old kid these days and you missed seeing Jimi Hendrix, you missed the best thing that has ever happened, since 1945 in modern music. And there's no way we can reconstruct that for you. It's never going to happen again. I never got to see Charlie Parker. I never got to see Louis Armstrong. I never got to see Frank Sinatra. These were the giants of my father's era, and I just have to live with that.
Did you see Elvis Presley?
No.
Any interest in seeing Elvis Presley or a Buddy Holly? Or
I would have loved to see Buddy Holly. I would have loved to see Elvis. Most of all, I would have loved to have seen Eddie Cochran, who I was a huge fan of, and a number of other people from that era. But no, the only guy I got to see was Bill Haley.
Well, they're going to jump in and make us end Pete Townshend. So I can't thank you enough. One of the highlights for me, and again, radio thanks you for all you've given us. And it's interesting that so many of you are now starting to gladly pick up the telephone and give us a call. It means an awful lot to all of us at radio, and especially here in the great city of Detroit, sir.
Well, we've got a record. We want you to play it, but we do, of course, always remember what you've done for us in the past. We never forget, and we're back, and it's great to make contact. And through you and your station, I can apologize.
For what?
Well, for saying that I wouldn't go and see Bob Dylan,
all right,
or that he's wrinkly.
All right.
I can tell you, folks, I saw him last week, and he's wrinkly.
All right, well, listen, be well.
Then so am I. So thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, and be well. Bye-bye.
You can subscribe to the Ken Calvert Show podcast on Apple iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. It's also available by going directly to www.thekencalvertshow.com. The preceding program is the property of Ken Calvert and may not be rebroadcast without the written permission of Ken Calvert.